Hi folks, welcome to the Prepared Homestead. This is Travis. Thank you all for stopping by to watch. I want to talk to you about your money today. And it's interesting that I've been working on this kind of topic and thinking about it, and come to find out just today I noticed that two other YouTube channels that put out the same kind of content that I do are talking about the same thing. And I see that a lot, and I have people ask, are you collaborating with, Pinball or, Zach Bauer or Bear Independent or, Southern Prepper One or no, actually not. I've never collaborated at all with any of them when it comes to my content. It is interesting, though, sometimes how several of us will put out very, very similar content at the same time. And it's not just stuff that is big in the news. I mean, that kind of makes sense, right? If there's something big in the news and we all talk about it, that's one thing. But sometimes it's just stuff we're talking about and it just happens to line up. So this video, as far as I know, both an American Homestead, Zach Bauer, has been talking about this. Check out his stuff. And then Southern Prepper One has been talking about it. I would guess, and from what I've seen so far, their content's probably better than mine on this subject, but I have something also to add. When we're talking about finances, the economy, inflation, and how they're just taking advantage of you every chance they get. I want to give a shout out to my buddy Dan. Look at my crazy, and people say, you putting dye in your beard. Does that look like I'm putting dye in anything? No. Anyways, he made me this hat. These are not for sale. This was a gift, but I'm just proud of it. I like it. I think it's really cool. I should have thought of something like that. But anyways, I wanted to just show you that and say thanks for doing that. Yes, the dog's down here, and she's going to drink the creek dry because we torture our dog by not allowing her to have water. That's not true at all. She's a pup. She's a 6-month-old Pyrenees cross Commodore, and she's a little crazy, and she thinks this creek is here for her own enjoyment. Anyways, so economy, finances, inflation, how they are... Man, I try to keep this very G-rated family friendly and trying to choose the right words. They are taking advantage of you in a molestation level of way when it comes to money. So let's just say it that way. We are taught, and I'm sure there's probably going to be someone that leaves a comment to the effect that I don't know what I'm talking about because I don't have the expertise level of knowledge when it comes to economic theories and all that kind of stuff. I don't care. I have studied them for years. I don't claim to be any kind of expert. I did take some business and banking classes in college, but I have no degree in this field. But I can read the last time I checked, and that's usually good enough. So anyways, we are made to believe that annual year-over-year inflation is what we should pay attention to. And I very firmly believe that that is done for purpose. And what I mean by that is for instance, right now, we're being told, now I don't believe these numbers, there's too much evidence to the contrary, but for the sake of the argument, please remember, for the sake of the argument, we are going to use official numbers. The official number of inflation right now is 4%. That's what they're telling us. It's 4%. And that sounds actually fairly low. Now, you and I know that we're paying way more than that for goods out there and services. But 4% is what they're saying the inflation is. But even if that was a true number, that's year-over-year inflation. That means that prices are inflated 4% over what they were last year, okay? They were inflated last year also, and they were inflated the year before that, the year before that, and the year before that, and sometimes they go down a little bit, sometimes they go up a little, and sometimes they go up a lot. But they never go into the negative, because the only way to get us back below inflated prices is that we'd have to have negative inflation, deflation, like negative. And we don't have that. So even the years that we could say, well, inflation was only 1%, that's a manageable and inflationary number, or 2%. That's what they say they're shooting for. It's what the Fed says that they want to see is 2%. That's still 2% of the money that you're spending is being taken away from you. You see, we have to throw away all the stuff that we've been taught for for years, our whole life, really, of how money systems, the economy, inflation, debt, how all that works. Because there's been I believe, a very specific effort to teach the American people everything from grade school to high school into college and grad schools, that it works one way when it really works the other. When we're talking about inflation, inflation is a way that they have of stealing from you. It's a hidden form of tax. And it shouldn't exist. There's no reason for it to exist. If we had sound money systems where our money had a specific value and it retained that value, regardless of what happened, there would be no inflation ever. But because they're able to manipulate the value of our currency, you have to spend more for certain things at certain times. And the amount of money that you're spending extra, well, it floats to the top. Right? And that's why we're seeing a much wider gap between the wealthy and the poor, even the wealthy and the middle class. In fact, we're getting to the point now that we hardly have a middle class, which is something that's been very unique to America. We were really the first to develop a middle class. In the past, it was only the wealthy elite, and then it was the dirt poor, poverty, slaves, things like that. So we've been different in that sense, that there was this middle class. They weren't super wealthy. Well, that's why the dog, what she does. Sorry about that. We weren't super wealthy, but, you know, we weren't dirt poor living in the gutters. Well, that's starting to change. And if we keep down this path, it's definitely going to change. Now, I'm getting to a point, so stay with me. Inflation is a way to take that from us. In the past, as much as, you know, we're not taught this, most governments, most monetary systems did not have inflation. The only times they had inflation is when they manipulated the money. When they manipulated the money supply, then there was inflation. Rome did this. Rome, you know, their coins, it was gold and silver coins. And then they started trimming off the edge of the coins. So, you know, if it was 1 ounce, I mean, that's a modern way of measuring, but let's just say 1 ounce of coin, then they would trim off a couple of grams here and a couple of grams there and a couple of grams there, and you would still use it as a 1 ounce. So it cost you a 1 ounce, but they're taking some of the gold out of it. Well, now they just do it differently. You're still, you know, it's a dollar, but your dollar has less buying power. And we have seen, since the advent of the Federal Reserve and the Federal Reserve currency, which our currency is not United States currency. It's from the Federal Reserve. It's a note from the Federal Reserve, which is a private entity, not part of the government. We've watched our buying and purchasing power drop by literally thousands of percentage points over the last, you know, little over a century, 110, 115 years. We've watched it drop. Let me show you an example of this. I'm going to put a graphic. I'm probably going to cover my whole face, which will be pleasant for many of you, so that you can see this. This is very small example, okay? But this type of example really holds true with just about anything. Campbell's tomato soup. Some of you may have seen this. Campbell's tomato soup. In 1898, Campbell's tomato soup cost 10 cents a can. It stayed at 10 cents to 12 cents. It fluctuated a little here and there. So at some point, it was sometimes 11 cents, sometimes 12, sometimes 10, sometimes 9. But it stayed an average between 10 and 12 pennies a can from 1898 up until 1970. So in 1970, you were paying the exact same price for a can of tomato soup as your grandparents or your great-grandparents were in 1898, almost 80 years prior to that. In 1970, it's changed. And as you can see on this chart, the price of a can of tomato soup went up dramatically. And in fact, now in 2023, the average price of a can of soup is $1.25. $1.25 is the average price, and it's just continually going up. Why is that? Why is it that and I'm sure if you went back, of course, I don't know when they came out with Campbell's soup. It may have been in 1898. But if you went back with something that had been around for 200 years, you would see that the price of it stays the same. I have often spoken of, and many other people have, a 1 ounce gold coin. 1 ounce gold coin. I don't have one on me. 1 ounce gold coin. 2,000 years ago would buy what would have been considered a fine men's attire. You know, a nice cloak, a nice belt, a nice pair of sandals, whatever a man, a somewhat wealthy, a well-to-do, a businessman and 2,000 years ago in Rome. If you were in Rome and you wanted to buy and have a nice set of clothing made for you, it would cost approximately 1 ounce of gold. In the 1920s and 30s, if you wanted to go to a suit shop and get you a nice tailor-made suit, you could get one made and pay for it with 1 ounce of gold, about $50. Now in 2023, if you wanted to buy a nice, and I'm not talking those fancy, stupid, ridiculous designer, I'm just saying a nice suit, a nice business attire, you can get it for 1 ounce of gold, which is $2,200, $2,400. Now that sounds ridiculous. I know many of you are saying, I don't pay that for a suit. I'm talking about a nice tailor-made suit, a nice pair of shoes, a nice belt, a nice shirt, a nice tie, nice. Yes, you can get nice for $700, $800, $900. But if you want something good and nice and tailor-made, tailor-fit, it's going to cost you probably $2,000 to $2,500, and that's not going into the designer stuff. The price of things, the value of things, the value of currency, of real money, does not change. But our currency does. And I'm saying all this, and I know many, many, many of you already know this. I know many of you know this. But I'm saying this to reiterate a point that I make from time to time on this channel. For those of you that are more naysayers, for those of you that don't think that the war's going to happen, I've seen comments just in the last week when I talk about World War III. Many people still think it's not going to happen, and they may be right. But a lot of the same people that are saying World War III is not going to happen, meaning us, China, Russia, some conglomeration of that, were the same people that were saying that Russia was not going to invade Ukraine. Even up until the day of, there were a lot of people saying that it's just saber rattling. Russia is not going to invade Ukraine. They're just trying to make a show. Well, of course, we know what happened. But even if that doesn't happen, there are a lot of people that are saying things like, CBDC or grid failure or, another pandemic. It's not gonna be that bad. Even if all those people are correct, even if they're correct in the sense that these things aren't going to happen or they're not going to be as severe as we prepper folks are trying to make them out to be, that we don't have to plan for the apocalypse, folks. I mean, things may get a little rough sometimes, but we're not going to go through the end of all times. Well, I'm telling you, when you look at our monetary system, you look at the fact that we're somewhere in the neighborhood of $33 trillion now in debt, and we're going crazy in debt. We're talking, tens of billions of dollars a week, hundreds of billions of dollars sometimes in a week, that we are going into debt, sometimes hundreds of billions of dollars in a day. They've removed the debt ceiling, so there's no limit right now. They estimate that in removing the debt ceiling that it could up our debt $2 to $3 trillion, but that's just an estimation. If we end up in a war, it could skyrocket. It could go nuts. The fact that we are in a level of debt that can never, ever, ever be paid back, the fact that our currency is losing value at such a rapid rate, going back to the inflation, the year-over-year inflation, we hear, oh, it's only 4%. Oh, last year it was like 8% or whatever. Again, that's year over year. How much more are you paying for something versus 5 years ago? What were you paying for a loaf of bread 5 years ago? You could probably look that up. I don't know. I didn't take the time to look it up, and I can't remember that far back. I've slept a couple of times. But if you took a regular, I don't know, Sara Lee, colonial bread, just something that's kind of a universal brand, what is the price of it now versus 5 years ago? It's more than 4% increase. I promise you it's more than a 4% increase. Milk, most things. There are maybe a few things that the price has hardly changed at all. But in general, most things are much more expensive than they were 5 years ago. How about 10 years ago? Let's do this. I'm 45. Let's assume everyone's 45 for the sake of my cheesy analogy. And I moved out on my own. I bought my first house at 17. But let's just say it's 20. Let's use nice round numbers. So it's been 25 years that I've been out on my own and as an adult, let's just say. And let's say that's the same way with everyone. How much more are you paying for things than you were 25 years ago? How much more is a house payment than it was 24? I owned a house 25 years ago. I owned a house. I bought a house. I was married by that time, and we bought a house. I'd bought a house when I was 17, and then I got married, and we ended up selling that and bought another house. And this was a nice ranch style in a very small town, kind of on the outskirts. Had a large lot, little over an acre lot. It was a 2,300 square foot house. 25 years ago, that was a pretty large house. It needed some fixing up. I mean, it was all cosmetic, you know, like some paint. It needed some new carpet. The roof was fine. The roof was solid. You know, the yard, it needed some landscaping. There was some bare spots and high grass, that kind of thing. It hadn't been taken care of, but it was structurally sound. You know, the furnace and all that. So anyways, long story short, we bought that house, and our house payment, I think it was $425 a month. That was 25 years ago. $425 a month. You try to find a house comparable. You could even buy that same house today. It's 25 years older. And I promise you, it's still standing. I promise you, that house will be a whole lot more in house payment than $425 a month. I promise you, it probably will be well over $1,000 a month. In fact, the average house price now, I think, is somewhere around $1,800 a month for an average mortgage payment. Car payments. I can't believe when I see people talk about their car payments, that they're paying $700, $800, $1,000 a month on car payments. I can remember, I haven't had a car payment in years, but I can remember car payments being like a couple of $100, $150. This is inflation, folks. This is the devaluing of your money. So inflation should not be figured year over year, because it's increment. Even if it's a big jump, it's still incremental. You add it up over the last 20, 25 years. And here's the thing. Odds are the average person is not making whatever the percentage is, whatever you figure out, you know, that you're paying more for over the last 25 years, whatever that inflation number is. The odds are you're not making that same percentage increase in salary. It's just not true. Most of you would say so. It's not true. I can look at my salary increase from 25 years ago, and while I am making more money now, I'm certainly not making the same percentage increase as inflation, as my house payment. If my house payment back then was $425 and the average house payment today is around between $1,500 and $1,800, that's somewhere between a 300% and 400% increase in salary. I'm not making 300% to 400% more money annually than I was 25 years ago. I'm making more, but it's certainly not 300% to 400% more. That's inflation. You can go back further to the 70s, to the 60s, to the 1930s. But let's just take in your lifetime as an adult, how much has things inflated? Which means how much less buying power is your money. This is what they don't want you to see. This is what they don't want you to find out about. This is how they're taking your wealth. This is why over the last 3 or 4 years, we have seen the wealth gap go like this. We have seen the average, and I know there's some of you say, well, I made it pretty good. Maybe certain industry, certain business that did well during the lockdowns and during COVID, but the average person is not making substantially more money today than they were 3 years ago. But how much more are the wealthy people worth? How much more is businesses like Coca-Cola and Dodge and Chevy, even Bud Light, Budweiser, as much as they've lost because of everyone not wanting to drink Bud Light, they're still worth substantially more than they were 3 years ago. They're worth a lot more than they were just a year ago. How much more is Bill Gates worth? How much more is Elon Musk worth? How much more are all these wealthy people? How much more are these congressmen worth from 3 years ago? They have all dramatically increased their wealth. They do every year. They go in as worth maybe a couple $100,000, and they come out, 20 years later as being a congressman worth $20 or $30 million. How many of you can do that? Get a job and increase your wealth that number? None of you probably, unless you're just really smart and you invent something really amazing. This is what they're doing. So even if these apocalyptic things that I mention all the time, that I tell you to get ready for, even if those don't happen, this is happening, and it's getting worse. And at some point, because now it's getting so large that other countries are saying, America's debt is too much. We don't want part of their monetary system. We're going to go to the Chinese one and Russia and stuff, because they're backing theirs up by gold. At least they're talking about that. we're watching us on an international level lose prominence because of our gross bloated debt. And at some point, it's going to collapse the economy. That's why we're watching banks collapse. There was 2 this last week. There was several weeks ago. We're watching that more and more. The Federal Reserve has even said that we're going to have more banks collapse before the end of the year. So is the Treasury Department. We are watching this stuff happen. And you could say it's for all these other reasons, and that would be correct. But it's also because we have fake money. We have fake money. And we've tolerated it for far too long to now it's at a level that is completely out of control, cannot be handled, cannot be paid back, cannot be changed. At this point, the only thing to do is to continually pushing to go into more and more extreme debt, not even a little debt. The only way that we can keep the economy going is to be in extreme debt. That's why they're spending so much money, because the beast has gotten so big they have to do that to feed it. So I have people ask, well, what about this digital money? How's that going to help? How is that going to happen? Because they'll know at some point that the current paper fake currency is so bad that it's collapsing. They will allow it to collapse. I think that's what they're doing now. That's why they're spending and creating so much fake money now. It's fake to you and I, but it allows the wealthy to consume our wealth. Our wealth. They're consuming our wealth with the fake money that they're printing. And so at some point, they'll say there's too much of it. The dollar, just let it collapse. But here, now we have this digital money for the common people, but we've already consumed all of your wealth. That's what we're seeing happen. So even if World War III and pandemics and grid down and all that kind of stuff doesn't happen, we are absolutely, definitely, 100% watching them consume all of our wealth into this fake money system, going into ridiculous amounts of debt on a daily basis. On a daily basis. The average amount of debt that this country is going into on a daily basis, the average one household, one income family could not pay it off in hundreds and hundreds of years. Just one day's worth of debt. And it's happening every day, and it's getting worse and worse. It's being done for a purpose. They're consuming your wealth. They're taking as much as they can. They're squeezing every drop of blood they can out of that because they know it's coming to an end. It's why you need to be getting prepared, getting stocked up, getting ready. Don't be dependent upon their system so that when it collapses, it's not going to affect you as much. It will affect you. It will affect everyone. But the less dependent you are on it, the more you're independent, the more you're capable of providing the needs, the things that you need to survive, or the people around you can, the less it's going to hurt you. And that's what you need to do because it is coming. It's absolutely coming. I don't know when, but I can promise you it will come. It has to. It's the only way. Now is the time to get your houses in order. It's time to prepare yourselves mentally, physically, and spiritually. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.